Alright. You know you're gonna see the best, the worst with the shit flick critic. You know you're gonna see shit that's absurd with the shit flick critic. From Pandemic, The Room, Samurai Cop, True 2. Man, I says a fake mime and connection too. So come along, see the worst with me. I'm the shit flick critic. Self-isolation edition. G'day everyone, my name's Andrew Lewis and I'm the Shit Flick Critic, and this is my self-isolation in Blackpool edition. So basically, to those of you who are uninformed, I just got into England from Mexico, and I met a lady at the airport who graciously let me stay at her place while all this corona stuff was going on. And given that I don't have a laptop or any means of making a highly polished episode, I'm instead going to do a sort of more vlog-ish rendition of my normal series. So that's it really. I hope everyone's doing okay throughout all this. It's quite confusing times, and I hope you get some enjoyment out of this while you're all sitting at home not doing a lot. And today we will be talking about surviving edged weapons, which is a video that was released in 1988 what was it? It was a police training video in Wisconsin. I believe it was for the Milwaukee police, but it could be maybe for greater Wisconsin, I'm not sure. But so there's not really a lot of information about sort of the history of how the video came to be. All I know is that it was directed by Dennis Anderson, and it was made to train officers in the Wisconsin police force on how to deal with sort of any interactions with a suspect who has any kind of edged weapon or pointy thing, basically. They use the word, edged weapon a lot, and that's meant to mean like a knife, a machete, and even at one point there's a ninja star, which I'm not quite sure how often a American police officer is going to encounter a ninja star, but it's a very bizarre video, and it's way too thorough, which I think is what the problem is. Like, a lot of the weapons that they cover, I'm really not sure if the average police officer is ever going to either encounter a ninja star, or at one point there's even a proper sword that an assailant uses to attack a police officer. I don't know how often that happens. I'm not saying people can't buy swords or that they couldn't use them against a police officer or someone else, but it's just more the frequency in which that's going to happen, and do people really need to be trained in how to deal with sword attacks? And even then, like in the footage where they show a police officer being attacked by the sword, they don't even offer any advice on how to... All that happens is an officer goes to someone's door and says, "Oh, we have a warrant for your arrest," or something of that nature. And the guy just looks over, sees a basically like a two-handled claymore, picks it up, opens the door ajar, and just stabs the police officer in the belly. And then that's it. And then we move on. It's like, oh, okay. You're going to maybe say how to, this is an instructional video, how for that not to happen, but they don't. So we'll talk about the story for a sec. So the story, for lack of a better word, basically, it's dealt sort of like an instructional video, like you would get if you started a job, like the kind of like to protect your personal safety. Like, in the workplace, there are many dangers. It's sort of that kind of vibe, but there's a guy and he's very serious about all these encounters with edged weapons. And the beginning of the documentary, for lack of a better word, takes place in caveman times. Like, they go all the way back to like prehistoric times to explain why people would ever need something to stab someone else, really, which is a question I don't think anyone ever asked or needed answering. Like, there's no one in the Wisconsin police force that's about to watch this video that's like, oh, what I can understand is why anyone would ever need a knife or something pointy. And I can't even imagine when in history it even started and why they needed it. It's like, it's a pointy thing. Like, we get it. Because they go, like, the little scenario is this big caveman eating meat, and there's another caveman that wants his meat, so he uses a knife to get, or I think it's a pointed stick to get said meat. It's like, yep, I'm glad we cleared that up. Now we know why people would need a weapon, essentially. And then from there we go into like interviews with actual real police officers that have encountered suspects with knives in the force and been attacked. And that's probably the part of the whole video that sort of has the most serious tone, because it is quite sad. Like, a lot of these police officers actually do look quite traumatized while they're recounting the events, in which left a lot of them in hospital with various, like, a guy got cut all around his face and someone got stabbed in the back by this crazy dude that was on a tractor. So yeah, that's very, very sad. And I was thinking at that point, I'm like, I don't know what everyone was talking about, like why this video was crazy, because I'm thinking in my head, they're going to interview these people and then they're going to go through a bunch of real world scenarios that have happened and show why it went wrong and what police officers could do in future to avoid situations like that. Or if it went well, what went right. That doesn't happen. They talk to all these police officers that give very realistic accounts of times when they've been attacked. And then they just kind of throw a bunch of fictional scenarios at you that are just so far-fetched and ridiculous. You just have to laugh, because like some of them are like, it starts off very subtle and it goes from like pulling over someone in a car and asking for their license and they just stab you in the face, to which could possibly happen, to Satanism and going into a house and a lady's about to stab a baby with a knife, and that's how they kind of link in the edged weapon bit. But even in there, again, they don't offer any real information on what to do if you ever actually encounter this. The officer just shoots her. So I guess the message there is like, if you ever see someone with a Satanist with a knife, just shoot them. Also, like, something that really kind of detracts from the seriousness of the whole thing as a whole is the acting, because a lot of the actors, it feels like they don't really know that they're supposed to be in a serious video, because like especially because the fact that a lot of them, I believe, come from Wisconsin, so they all have a lot of very thick accents, which kind of definitely takes away from some of the serious tone of a lot of the scenes. Like, there's this one scene, and because it's the 80s too, like there's this one dude and he's got like a mullet and a moustache, and he's driving, I think it appears to be a stolen car or something like that. So a police officer pulls him over and says, "Hey there, get out the car." And he gets out and it's like, "Show me your license." And this dude's like, "Oh yeah? You want me to show you my license? Here's my license." And he goes in and pulls out a knife. He's like, "Come and get my license." And then the police officer goes, "Drop it." He's like, okay, I was just joking with you. It's like, why am I watching this? If he was just joking, then how is this an example of how to survive an encounter with an edged weapon? Like, he was joking, and then we all move on with our lives. It's just a very bizarre scenario. Another one that's equally strange is this officer is in a car park in a supermarket, and this lady goes, "There he is, officer. That's the guy that stole the meat." And there's just this dude that goes to get in his car just with meat that he stole. I don't know if meat thievery is a large problem in Wisconsin and something that the average officer is going to encounter. But he goes, "Hey, you there, drop the meat." So I think of the dude pulls out a knife and he's like, "Hey, drop that on the ground." And he goes, okay, but it's a really special knife to me, so I'm going to have to put it down really carefully. And he's like, "Okay, all right, put it down slowly." It's like, again, why am I watching this? Like, how is that really a realistic scenario that the officer's going to encounter? And it just gets more bizarre from there. And I just, as I said, it's weird that they just didn't use actual things that have happened to people that would be realistic and that would be of actual concern, instead of these, and at one point this bunch of officers, they stop these drug people, it's the 80s, so that they're obviously cocaine dealers counting money. And that whole scene, like, the only reason why it's in the movie is one of them happens to have a knife, but like the rest of these cocaine dealers are just shooting at the police officers, and it's just like, wait, why am I watching this scene now? Like, they're just shooting at them, and the officers just fire back with their guns. And it's, I mean, I suppose that bit was to show what officers should do if they find a knife, and it was saying, like, make sure you don't get fingerprints on it and stuff. But I just feel like this whole thing could have been about 15 minutes long, because there's a lot of faffing, as they say in Manchester. There's a lot of faffing about, and a lot of just like regurgitating information that's really not necessary. So it can get quite boring and stagnant. And there's even once, like the guy who does the narration, I think he must have known that it was, well, he's just, his tone is just super serious for something that's so ridiculous. And at one point they literally just go through a big list of different pointy objects and how they can harm you, which again was really unnecessary. Once you've explained how one knife works, I really don't think you have to go through a bunch of others, because in the end the explanation is just they'll cut you. But there's this is, they're going through like people hiding razors in their lighters and stuff like that. And at one point they show a grapefruit cutter, which I didn't know was a thing. And it's got two blades for some reason. And it's like, look at this grapefruit cutter. This would be like being stabbed with two knives. It's like, yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it is two knives. And then at one point someone's got a fork, and I was almost expecting to say, oh, that's a fork. That would be like being stabbed with four knives. So yeah, he's very, very, and his tone is quite monotonous as well. But yeah, it's and also they show a lot of very, very graphic photos of poor police officers that have actually been stabbed, which again, it just makes the tone all over the place, going from these completely ridiculous scenes that have likely to never happen to actual police officers that have been really stabbed. Like I think one of them's got like a knife sticking out of his throat, and someone else is dead. And so it's a bit of a wild ride, and it's hard to kind of get a grasp on what's actually how you're supposed to feel about all this. But there are times, in its defense, there are times where I was actually super interested. They've got this whole scene devoted to how much of a reaction time you would have if someone pulled out a gun and ran at you. And it's actually quite interesting, because they've got a bunch of different police officers reacting at different times to show you. And because I would have thought if someone ran at me with a knife from 6 feet away and I had a gun holstered, I would just pull the gun out and shoot them. But it's actually not that simple, because they can cover a lot of ground, and I think they said it needs to be like 10 feet or something. So that was one point that I think should have been most of the documentary, because it's actually based on real life and real studies they've done, and not just like caricatures of people doing things. Another scene that I just loved was the narrator's like, you need to look out for subtle clues that might let you know that someone has intent to hurt you. And this lady police officer, there's a dude standing by a van, and she pulls up. She's like, oh, what are you doing here? And he just pulls out a machete from his front window and just runs at her, screaming like, ah! It's like, yeah, that's a pretty subtle sign that I think he means me harm. It's like, I was almost expecting them like to slow it down and go, see how he's brandishing that machete and running at an incredible speed? Clear indicators that he means to cause you physical harm upon interacting with you. So it's very silly and very, very strange, but a big laugh. I had a very, very, very fun time watching this, and even just the aesthetic alone of being from the 80s and all these different scenarios. I'm trying to think if there's anything else worth talking about. Ninja Stars, we did that. Prehistory. No, I think that's about it. It's just great, and you should definitely check it out. It's on YouTube, so it's all there to watch. So time to do the rating, as I'm sure a lot of you who are long-time watchers are familiar with. So I judge shit flicks based on 5 categories. Number 1, laughability. Honestly, watching this, I haven't actually laughed that loud in a long time. It's very funny. You will laugh, and there's just so many strange scenarios that will just have you on the floor. I'm trying to think of a good one even now. It's just the fact that everyone's got a knife. Like, I didn't realize knives. I thought the problem with America was the fact that everyone was armed with a gun. But in this universe that this police video is created, it seems like everyone has a knife and will definitely use it to harm a police officer. As I said, not saying that these things never happen to police officers, because as we can tell by the first-hand accounts, they do. It's just more the frequency of it, and that every single person in this video has a knife and brandishes it and wants to harm someone. So it's very, very silly. Rewatchability, yeah. You could definitely watch it like once a year. Watch it with it's not really kid friendly with all that graphic footage, but it's something you can watch a lot just because it's just so chuckle worthy. The pace is great. You know, I think sometimes they do just waffle on about the same point, and it seems to just go on. Like as I said, when he's talking about how different knives work, it's like you kind of know where this is going. It's like, oh yeah, it's a knife and it cuts someone. Okay. Production value is very good. Obviously, they put a bit of money into it. So yeah, no faults on that account. A lot of the blood, effects and everything are pretty well made, I think. And the intention, I mean, it was made to actually warn police officers about how to avoid being stabbed with a knife. So I can't really fault it in that respect. But it's just the way that they chose to get that message across was just very, very unusual. So I ran out of a Sharpie to do my stars, but I give this -4 stars. It's brilliant. It's a great thing to watch. A lot of bad movies are boring, or this one got me, and I'm not easily got. I loved it, so you guys should definitely check it out. And also check out because it's Red Letter Media that did it first, I believe, because they're from Wisconsin. It's probably how they found out about it, but definitely watch their review on it too. But yeah, definitely worth watching. Great movie, and I hope you enjoyed that review. We're 15 minutes in, so that's really it. And let me know what you think about this style of me doing it. It's not going to be a permanent thing. It's just a way for me something to do while I'm in this house in Blackpool trying to work out just waiting this thing out. And so let me know if there's anything you think I could improve on, or but that's really it for now. Now while I got you, I'll tell you what, I'll just tell you a funny story from traveling. And seemings is how we're talking about Wisconsin. I'll talk about when I was actually very close to Wisconsin. At one point I was in Manitoba in Canada, and I was hitchhiking, and I got picked up in Regina by this truck driver, and he was going to take me to Manitoba, and I was like, okay, great. It was like 10 hours, I think. It was a long ride. And when we got to Winnipeg, he's like, do you want to come stay with my family? They're all Mennonites. I was like, I didn't know what a Mennonite was, but apparently it's very similar to Amish. And I was like, okay. And we went there, and it wasn't they weren't Amish, like it wasn't like they were on horse and carts or anything. Some Mennonites are. These ones weren't. Lovely people. His parents got up at 1 o'clock in the morning to say hi to me, and they're in their little dressing gowns. And I stayed with them for a couple of days, and they took me to a Mennonite museum to learn all about them. And I was like, okay. And then at one point, the son goes, "Do you want to come with me to there's a wedding on in a place called Zoda in Manitoba, which is like right next to the border of Minnesota." So I was like, okay. So we went to this. It was just like a community hall wedding. It wasn't really. I think it was. We just went to the reception. We didn't actually see the thing, but it was just so bizarre being there, and just being so far from home and in this community hall with all these people. And I didn't know any. I only knew the guy that took me there, and people kept talking to me like, "Oh, so you're Australian, yeah? What are you doing in Zoda in Manitoba?" I was like, "Oh." I'm like, I was hitchhiking yesterday, and that gentleman over there, Charlie, he picked me up and he brought me here, so that's why I'm here. And they were just like, "What? Oh, wow." And I got up, and because someone came up to me, he's like, "What's that?" Because they had karaoke, and I said I was going to do a song. He's like, "What's that Australian song about the guy who's he's 6 feet tall?" I was like, "Oh, I come from a land down under." He's like, "Could you do that song for me?" I'm like, "Can I?" And I got up and sung it, and they loved it. And I left off Ontario the next day, so that was a very interesting time. And yeah, lovely people and a lovely province. But that really sums it up. I'm almost at 20 minutes now, so I hope you guys again are doing all well throughout this whole thing. It's again, no one really knows what's going to happen, but I wish you all the best. I'm going to make another one of these soon. And thus it concludes my video. But to see you out, I'll give you a little sing-song. Know you're gonna see the best of the worst with a shit flick critic. You know you're gonna see shit that's absurd with the shit flick critic. From Epidemic the Room, Samurai Cop Troll 2, Mental Sense of Fame, Mind Connection 2, Coco Malone.